What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Oak Tree Football Channel. Football is almost back. We are less than a month away from the start of the NFL and college football this year, and I decided now is the perfect time to make my predictions. Over the next few weeks, I'll be trying to go through all 8 NFL divisions and giving my predictions for them for this year, and then at the end, I'll make one big video combining everything. I was going through each team and making an independent record prediction, but I think I'd rather do this. Anyway, today I'll be taking a look at the NFC West, which in my opinion is the best division in the NFL, and I'm going to be giving an in-depth prediction, going through each team and predicting their record for this year. But now, let's get into it, starting at number 4. We're at the LA Rams finishing 8-8. I don't think the Rams will be a bad team this year. I just don't think they'll be as good as the rest of the division. I think Sean McVay is a great young coach, but I just think there are some missing pieces on the team that need to be fixed before they can be a Super Bowl or even a playoff contender again. I don't think Jared Goff is a bad quarterback, but if he wants to take this team to the playoff, I think he really needs to step up this season. The Rams didn't have the best offseason either, letting Todd Gurley go and trading Brandon Cooks to the Texans while not really signing anyone to help the team. They didn't have a first-round pick, but were still able to make some good picks in the draft, like Cam Akers, Van Jefferson, Terrell Lewis, and Terrell Burgess. I actually think Cam Akers can be a very good player and an okay replacement for Gurley. Not having Gurley on the team is going to hurt, but they have Akers and a few others in the running back positions, such as Darrell Henderson Jr. and Malcolm Brown, who can take some pressure off Jared Goff. The wide receiver position isn't great for the Rams. They have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, who are both very talented, but not much else behind them. They have some great, pretty reliable tight ends in Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett, who I could both see having big seasons. Their offensive line, though, may not be as reliable. Their offensive line 2 years ago was one of the best in the NFL, if not the best, but last year they just got so much worse, and I don't really see a reason why it will get so much better this year. But looking at the defensive side of the ball, they have some really talented players, obviously including Aaron Donald, who's arguably the best defensive player in football, and Jalen Ramsey, who's arguably the best cornerback. They also have some other talented players on the side of the ball, such as Michael Brucker, Samson Ebukam, Leonard Floyd, and a few other guys, but I think there's some serious holes on this defense. And I think they're lacking a bit of depth in multiple positions. The Rams definitely have some bright spots, but I don't think there's enough for them to be a playoff contender this season, especially playing in arguably the best division in football. I think the Rams are good, but just not good enough. I could see them sneaking into the playoff, especially with the introduction of a 7th playoff team, but I see them ending the season just short, having an about average record, which I currently have, as 8-8. Now, moving on to number 3, and I think this one might surprise some people. Coming in with a record of 11-5 at number 3, I have the defending NFC champions, San Francisco 49ers. Now, I know some people may not agree with me on this one, but before I say anything, I just want to say I don't think the 49ers are a bad team by any means. I still think they're one of the better teams in the league, and the only reason they're at number 3 is because of their divisional record. The 49ers were incredible last year, and I still think they're a fantastic team, but I just don't think they're as good as they were last year. They had an okay draft getting Brandon Ayuk, but not much else. The rest of the offseason was okay, as they did lose some very talented players such as Matt Breida, Emmanuel Sanders, DeForest Buckner, and Just Staley, but they were able to get some good players in return such as Trent Williams and a few others. Looking on the offense, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a bit overrated. Personally, I don't think he's the most talented quarterback out there, but he's good enough to get the job done. In my opinion, the running back group for the Niners is really good, and I think there's a huge reason why they made their Super Bowl run last year. They traded Matt Breida, but they still have some good players in the backfield, such as Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman, and Jerick McKinnon. Now, the receiving group is interesting for San Francisco. A lot of people consider it to be pretty good, but for me, I disagree. I don't necessarily think it's bad, but I definitely don't consider it to be great. For me, it's just about average. They lost both Emmanuel Sanders and Marquise Goodwin this offseason, both of which were pretty important to the team, and their receiving corps is currently set to be led by rookie Brandon Ayuk and second-year Deebo Samuel. I don't think those guys are bad players, but they're young and they still have a lot to learn. They recently signed Tavon Austin and J.J. Nelson, who are both veterans and can help teach Ayuk and Samuel, but they aren't the most reliable receivers in the field by any means either. Dante Pettis is a receiver to look out for, as he is heading into his 3rd NFL season, and he hasn't been great so far, but he should have a bigger role this season. Anyway, the 49ers have a fantastic tight end, George Kittle. He's incredible, arguably the best tight end in the NFL, and should have another huge season this year. Their offensive line is fantastic, probably a top 10 in the league with players like Trent Williams there. Their defense is probably the strong point of this team, as they have talent all over it, and it is probably top 5 in the NFL in my opinion. On the defensive line, they have Dee Ford, who wasn't great in 2019, but had a big year in 2018 with 13 sacks, and I think he could be able to bounce back up to double digits this year. On the defensive line, they also have Eric Armstead, who had double-digit sacks last year, rookie Javon Kinlaw, who should be solid this season, But the main point on this defensive line is Nick Bosa. Bosa won Defensive Rookie of the Year last season, and he was just fantastic. He had 9 sacks, which is very good for a rookie, and I honestly think he'll be even better this season. There were points last season when he didn't play great, but he ended the season on a high note, and I think he will continue where he left off. The linebacking core is solid with Quan Alexander, Dre Greenlaw, and Fred Warner, who can all be great players at times. The secondary is led by Richard Sherman, who is a fantastic quarterback, Quan Williams, who is coming off a career year, and a few other guys who can make plays while needed. This team is great, but I just think it is weaker than last year, especially on offense. I think they'll struggle early and maybe lose some games they shouldn't. I still see the team as a playoff team no matter what, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them back in a Super Bowl next year with the team they have. Next up, at number 2, coming in with the same record as number 3, 11-5, I have the Arizona Cardinals. Now, some people may not agree with this one either, but let me explain. First of all, the Cardinals weren't great last year, but most people didn't expect the Eagles to be so good a few years ago, or the Ravens to be so good last year, and I think the same could go for the Cardinals this season. Kyler Murray had a pretty good rookie season, and I expect him to improve in his second year. Let's take a look at some of the past NFL seasons. In 2017, before he got injured, second year Carson Wentz was one of, if not the best quarterback in the NFL. In 2018, second year Patrick Mahomes had one of the best seasons for a quarterback we have ever seen. And in 2019, second year quarterback Lamar Jackson set the single season rushing yard record for a quarterback while leading the NFL in passing touchdowns at the same time. You can't really use the past to tell the future, and I don't really think Murray will be as good as these three, but I think he'll have a similar step up, and I honestly could see him in the MVP conversation this season, since he is so good at both throwing the ball and is able to scramble as well, and his head coach is Cliff Kingsbury. Kingsbury is going into his second season leading the Cardinals, and I really like him as a head coach. He was pretty successful in college with the air raid system. In fact, while coaching at Texas Tech, he was able to have Patrick Mahomes on his team and helped him quite a bit to be the player he is, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him do the same for Murray. I've gone this far without even mentioning they traded for DeAndre Hopkins this season, who is arguably the best wide receiver in college football, and they drafted Isaiah Simmons, who in my opinion was a top 5 player in this year's NFL draft and the second best offensive player. Because they drafted Simmons, it means they couldn't strengthen their pretty weak offensive line, but in the third round they drafted Josh Jones, who is arguably a first-round talent anyway. Now looking at it position by position, we started off with Kyler Murray. I already talked about Murray a bit, but I think he can be a fantastic player this season. He reminds me a bit of Lamar Jackson, with the style of both running and passing. His coach likes using an air raid system, but has found ways to work Murray's ability of running the ball in with it. It may not be this year, but a few years down the line, I think we could see Murray as a top quarterback in the NFL. At the running back position, they have Kenny and Drake, who may not be the best player, but can definitely be solid at times. Their wide receiving group can be one of the better ones in the NFL, in my opinion. They, of course, have DeAndre Hopkins, who is an incredible receiver, and I still can't believe they were able to trade for him, and most likely backing him up, they have Larry Fitzgerald, who is 36 years old, but still plays on a high level, and is probably a top 5 receiver of all time, which leaves them with a top 5 receiver right now, and a top 5 receiver of all time. They also have Christian Kirk, who got a lot better last season, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get even better, especially when he is developing behind guys like DeAndre Hopkins and Larry Fitzgerald going into his third year. They also have a few other guys like Andy Isabella and Keyshawn Johnson, who I don't think are the best players, but can be solid this year. Their tight ends aren't great, but they have a few players I think can be decent, such as Dan Arnold and Max Williams. Their offensive line isn't great either, but I think it will be better this year, but that is one of the weaker points on this Cardinals team. On to the defense. The D-line is one of the things I'm most worried about for the Cardinals this season. They don't have the best players there, but I think their linebacking core is top tier. At inside linebacker, they have Devontae Campbell, who was fantastic for the Falcons last year, Jordan Hicks, who had 150 tackles and 3 sacks last season, rookie Isaiah Simmons, who is a monster. He can play all over the defense and dominates at almost any position and is currently my pick for Defensive Rookie of the Year. At outside linebacker, they have Devon Kennard, who has been pretty good for the Lions in the past few seasons. Hassan Reddick hasn't been anything special, but I think he can do big things. And Chandler Jones, who in my opinion is one of the best defensive players in the NFL, having 19 sacks last season. He's had double-digit sacks every year since 2015, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see him in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation at the end of the season. At cornerback, they have veteran Patrick Peterson, who wasn't great last year, but is still arguably a top 10 cornerback in the league, and I expect him to bounce back this year. And they also have Byron Murphy Jr., who is a second year, and I expect him to develop well, especially while backing up Peterson. At the safety position, they have Budda Baker, who I think is extremely underrated. He's going into his 4th season in the NFL, and I think he'll have his best year yet. Budda Baker is definitely a name to look out for this season. I think this team is really, really good, and though they do have their weak points, I still think this team has the potential to be a playoff contender this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see this team be lower than this, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them be worse than this, but I really think the stars are aligning for the Arizona Cardinals this year. And coming in at number 1, you probably already know who it is through process of elimination. I have the Seattle Seahawks coming in with a record of 13-3. I've thought of the Seahawks as a good team all offseason, but about a month ago I probably would have had them as second or third in the division. That was before they traded for Jamal Adams. Adding one of the best safeties in the NFL to one of the already best teams is going to be dangerous for oppositions this season, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Seahawks be one of, if not the best team in the NFL this year. I don't think their draft was great, but the rest of the offseason was pretty good, getting talented players like obviously Jamal Adams and Quinton Dunbar, strengthening the receiving core with Phillip Dorsett, and adding a good veteran tight end in Greg Olsen. Their offense is led by Russell Wilson, who is easily a top 3 quarterback in the league. He puts up great numbers each and every season and just elevates the overall play of his receivers, which is mainly the reason, among others, that he is so good. The running backs can't always stay healthy, but when they can be fantastic. They've had Chris Carson and Rashad Penny for a few years now, and adding Carlos Hyde to that group will likely make it even better. They have a solid receiving group with players like Tyler Lockett and David Moore, who can be very good receivers at times, especially Lockett. They also have second-year DK Metcalf, who was okay as a rookie, but should develop well heading into his second year on the team. As I mentioned earlier, they also added Phillip Dorsett to help out. Their tight ends aren't great, but they have a few solid guys like Will Dissly and veteran Greg Olsen. Their offensive line, though, is not very great. Honestly, it's probably towards the bottom of the NFL, but Russell Wilson is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL under pressure, so that helps at least a little bit. Their defense is one of the best in the NFL, and though it may not be the Legion of Boom it was a few years ago, it's still fantastic. I don't think their defensive line is too strong, but they have a good linebacking core, which is led by Bobby Wagner, but also has veterans like KJ Wright and young guys like rookie Jordan Brooks. At the cornerback position, they have a few talented guys in Quinton Dunbar, Trey Flowers, and Shaquille Griffin, and at safety they have Quandre Diggs, and of course Jamal Adams. I think the addition of Adams is what really puts this team over the edge, and that is why I have the Seattle Seahawks winning the NFC West this year. So those are my predictions for the NFC West this year. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, and if you're new around here or just haven't subscribed already, feel free to do so. That would really help me out, and I would really appreciate it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.